Time again for another installment of The Basics, and on today's show, going back to the Star Trek CCG, I want to talk about the conundrum that was the Deep Space Nine standalone expansion set. It was great for a number of reasons, but it also caused problems with the game due to Decipher trying to do something about previous expansions. So let me get into it with you right now. Now, I remember when the Star Trek Deep Space Nine standalone expansion came out, not too long after the official Tournament Seals deck made its appearance. And for many months, a lot of us players, including myself, were excited about the Deep Space Nine extension, not just because it was a standalone that you could play by itself, but because it introduced new affiliations such as the Bajorans and the Cardassians. And of course, even though I still consider the Bajorans to be a weak affiliation, they do have a lot of good personnel at key points. People like Leonalis, Jero Essa, we got the Emissary in the Warp Pack, Cermak Ren, there's a whole host of others, Major Kira. You also have the Cardassians, Tekeni Gamor, Damar, Gul Dukat, Danar, Ilim Garrick, so many good personnel as well as great ships. And it allowed players to build decks of brand new affiliations that did brand new things, and the missions that were set up for these affiliations were great as well. We also got, in addition to being introduced to the Gamma Quadrant and the Bajoran Wormhole, we got stations where you could put sites. So Cardassians had Nor and Terok Nor, which is the flip side of Deep Space Nine, and Bajorans had Deep Space Nine. And these were very helpful cards. That also gave us sites, which to be used in conjunction with the stations to download other cards faster, report personnel quicker, etc., etc. So everything was going well in the Deep Space Nine, especially that it had a lot of cool dilemmas, and I'm just going to show you a few. Any of the Chula dilemmas, this one is Chula pick 1 to save 2, Altonian Brain Teaser, and Dangerous Liaisons. These add a lot of punch when placed next to other dilemmas under missions. So it was, the Deep Space Nine set was great for that. It had a lot of kick-ass dilemmas. But in addition to all the good stuff that Deep Space Nine had, and I'm going to say also the Federation personnel that were included, i.e. the Deep Space Nine crew, and later the USS Defiant as a ship, what Decipher did was bring out the card called Oof, as well as a couple others that negated a lot of the effects of Kevin Uxbridge, Amanda Rogers, and of course one of my favorites, the Rogue Borg Mercenaries. This was done in response because apparently players were complaining that other players were using these three cards or multiples of Rogue Borg Mercenaries way too often. And as Decipher became famous for doing, they started listening too much to the butthurt child that got beaten all the time because their decks weren't good enough and they didn't prepare properly or construct a deck, and it cheapened a lot of the good cards that were already in the game from previous sets. This is something that didn't need to happen, and I personally believe to this day that not only did it piss a lot of people off, but this started the downfall of the Star Trek CCG through Decipher, mainly because they were pandering to whiners and crybabies. And if you ask a lot of players that are in my age bracket that started playing at the very beginning with the premier set, you'll get a lot of agreement on this. And I used to talk with other players at tournaments about how this affected those three cards. Never mind the fact that there was a lot of new artifacts like orbs and other cards that worked in conjunction with affiliations that became more powerful than other things. But Decipher came out and ruined these three cards for the most part, and you know, it's not cool. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not dissing the Star Trek Deep Space Nine expansion for the CCG. It was one of my favorites behind First Contact and the Dominion. But this became the first expansion where Decipher started pandering to the wrong crowd, the wrong niche of the Star Trek CCG group, if you will, by listening to the whiners and the crybabies and doing things that took otherwise great cards and cheapen them in the game was not something that should have been done. This started that downfall I talked about earlier. If they would have just left it alone, or maybe put out a few cards in that expansion that instead of weakening them would just counter them or do something else, maybe. But when you purposely bring out cards for that reason, it just takes the fun out of it. So as awesome as Deep Space Nine was, it set the benchmark for the wrong reasons. Have a great day, everybody.